This is a catechism on the Constitution of the United States. Arthur J. Stansbury published the year 1828. Remember, I said we'll talk about our common law tradition, and our Constitution of the United States is our common law tradition applied to government. Our Constitution of the United States is our common law tradition applied to government. Not applied to me, not applied to you. Our Constitution of the United States, its provisions do not fundamentally apply to me and you. Now, there are breaches of that. There's nothing in our Constitution for decades that limited me in any way or you. It did not apply to us until what? Until that horrible, stupid, needless, vicious, demonic war that occurred between and among us Americans. A nation of about 25 million people. That's not many, but during that war, in 4 years, slaughtered over 700,000 Americans, slaughtered each other to the tune of 700,000. That's a lot of people in a country no bigger than that. And out of that arose a lot of evil. We weathered it, but it caused problems, and one of them is, of course, slavery has always been the fly in the ointment. Always, and since our country's beginning. Why was it even here? I'll tell you why it was here. That's easy. Parliament in Britain said that our common law tradition only applied on the island called Britain. That's what they said. That was their official doctrine. They called it the free soil doctrine of our common law. Well, if it only applies in Britain, it does not apply in the American colonies of Britain. It does not apply in India, another colony of Britain. Pakistan, another colony. It does not apply in the Caribbean islands. Why didn't it apply? Why did they say that? Well, they used the excuse and said the free soil doctrine only applies, freemanship only applies on the island of Britain. And they said if any man's foot touches the soil of our island, all of his chains of servitude fall from his body, and he is ipso facto and forever free. Slavery has never, ever been lawful on the island called Britain. Oh, they had some stuff that came pretty close, like serfdom, but it wasn't slavery. And the justices in England have made that comment for the last 300 years, because they look and look, they can't find it, and it isn't, never has been. Why? Because Britain is a common law country. Well, all of the colonies, British Honduras, the Isle of Nevis, all of those places, they said that common law doesn't apply, therefore slavery is lawful. But they had a problem here in North America. It was different than the other colonies. How? Well, we were kinfolk. We were British kinfolk, and we didn't cotton to that idea. We said, wait a minute. You can tell those folk of a different race over in India that the common law doesn't apply. You can tell those mestizos and Indians down in British Honduras and Central America, common law doesn't apply. You can tell them in the Isle of Bermuda, the common law doesn't apply, and they won't know the difference anyway, so they're not upset about it, but we know the difference. We're upset about it, and it ain't going to happen here. No, the common law applies. Oh, things got real muddy, real vicious. In the end, it all came to a head. But England let it ride during the kingship of George I and George II. They didn't say nothing. They didn't say nothing. Matter of fact, George the First and George the Second, as is often said, they were Germans, by the way. They spoke German. They were born in Germany. They were related to the royalty of England, but they were fundamentally Germans, and they spent most of their time in Germany. George the First and George the Second. And what they loved more than anything else was that German beer. Now, these Germans do have that down to science, as you know. I mean, the oldest beer brewery in the world is in Germany. Oh, yeah, still there. And if I could pronounce the name of it, I would, but I can't pronounce those long German words. I get lost. My tongue gets tangled up. But there is a brewery over there. It's 1,000 years. Yeah, about 1,000 years old. And they use just 4 ingredients. The fundamental 4, no preservatives, nothing extra. The government has nothing to do with it. They leave them alone. Well, but they liked that beer, and no Germans had it down to science. The other thing, though, George the First and George the Second was the Fraus, the German girls. Remember that song, Wished They All Could Be California Girls? And they were singing about they grew up in California and they started traveling around the country, and they said, wow, I thought the California girls were all beautiful. And they got other places and said, wow, some of these girls in Kansas and Michigan and Alabama, good looking heifers. That's what they were saying. Pretty girls. And they wish they could all be in California. Well, that's the way it was back then, too. I remember reading about Joseph Plum Martin, the fellow that wrote the only memoirs we have of a Continental soldier, 7 years of service, signed up when he was 16. What a book. But he tells about, he was from Connecticut. He was a Yankee. From Connecticut, and New Jersey is right close. Well, of course, they were in the Continental Army and they were going different places. They got down to New Jersey. He said, I couldn't believe it when I got there. I was about 16, 17 years old. Those girls down there in New Jersey are knockouts. He figured all the girls where he lived were knockouts, see? That's the way we think. We think geographically. That's the way God made us. He wants us to love the land, our girls, and the girls you love, your boys, and that we live where you live, and you get familiar with the customs and the people and the local things that are going on. That's what God wants, because if he doesn't have that, government will migrate into a central location. There will be no freedom because there won't be any local government. That's natural. Well, we said we don't want any slavery, or we want our common law. See, common law doesn't allow slavery. Of course not. It's a Christian tradition. That's easy, and didn't work. Over time, it festered. George the First and George the Second just didn't do anything. They didn't do anything in the colonies, and they certainly didn't do anything in their home country, England. So America, if government just leaves a place like this alone, we got the common law. We'll become prosperous, and we did. And the English people would come here from England, and they were envious. They saw that our houses were bigger. We had more money than they did because government was leaving us alone. Huh. Well, they wanted a piece of it. That's why. And so George III got into office. He was, after his grandpa and his dad, he was actually born. He was German, but he was born in England. That was his home. And he stayed there, and somebody said, we got to get a handle on these colonies. They're richer than we are. Well, we can't have that. Those colonists, those guys are nobody. They're colonials. They don't know nothing. They're not bred and born unto politeness like we are. So what's the answer? Well, it's always the same. They're going to kick somebody's butt and take their stuff. The evil empire, that's their policy. Kick the other guy's butt and take his stuff. That's what they tried to do. And we resisted. We resisted. The Bible doesn't say attack. It says stand fast. Well, Catechism or Constitution, Stansbury, 1828. Question answer, see. Suppose I'm accused by my neighbor of some crime which is punished with death. What are the capital crimes? Well, our common law, the capital crimes are the same capital crimes in the Bible. Whatever God says is a capital crime in a common law, that's a capital crime. What are they? Well, murder, rape, kidnapping, treason, grand treason, not petty treason, grand treason. There's four. There's more. But the capital crimes in the Bible are the crimes that God says, if you let them go on, they will destroy your country. Oh, sodomy and lesbianism, those are capital crimes in the Bible. They will destroy your country. You don't mess around with those. If people are convicted of those, they are to be put to death. That's what the Bible says. Are we at liberty to read the Bible, study the Bible, say what it says? I am. If you try to do this, what I just said in Canada, they'll come after you and throw you in jail. If you say sodomy is a crime at all, it's wrong. It is wrong in the Bible. God, you say, well, should we be killing sodomites? I never said that. What I'm saying is this, watch. What I'm saying is that according to God, this is how God looks at our sin. He said, that is bad. It's so bad that if people are convicted, they're to be put to death. Now, there's a lot to be said about those. And the important point here that most people miss and never mention is when it comes to capital crimes, or this, nobody is to be executed for a capital crime unless the due process that the Bible demands is followed. If the due process that the Bible demands is followed, I dare say there'd be few people put on death row, but it's not. What is due process? Again, to remind you, it's this simple. Our common law is due process. Our common law is not the outcome standards like do not murder, do not rape, do not kidnap, do not commit sodomy. Those are outcome standards. Our common law is how do we decide? How? It answers the how question. How do we decide who has done that? We don't just make an accusation and then execute people. Oh, what? The law of city does that constantly all over the world, and we're in constant danger here of doing that. You've heard me tell about the governor of Illinois. Governors of Illinois go to jail a lot. I don't know if you noticed that. Illinois politics is vicious. Oh, it's terrible. And the governors that have been going to jail, like Walker, that was back in the 60s or 70s, 60s, well, wrong in there somewhere. He went to jail. Another one named, shucks, his name escaped me. He served under Westmoreland when Westmoreland, the general, was a young officer out of West Point. He served with him in North Africa. Ogilvy, I think his name was Ogilvy. He went to prison. Walker went to prison. And I'm not sure either one of them were guilty of anything. They found shoe boxes with cash in it under Walker's bed. All that tells me is he doesn't trust banks. That tells me he's pretty smart. Back then, if you did that and didn't look mainstream, they'd come after you. Is anybody willing to say that gold is a bad investment? You should keep it where you know where it is. I mean, well, obviously, people aren't talking that way as much because banks have proven themselves to be what the Bible has always said they are. Usury is against the law, according to the Bible. For centuries in Europe, it was called the scourge of all, I'm quoting what it was called, the scourge of all mankind. Well, capital crimes. which would render a man infamous. That would ruin his reputation. Must I be seized and tried because someone has accused me of a capital crime? This is the Catechism on the Constitution of the United States, Arthur J. Stansbury. Answer: no, you must either be confined to some other manner so you won't go away, put him on bail if he's not a flight risk, until his accusation is laid before 12 of your fellow freemen. No, back up. Well, 12 or more. 12 or more of your fellow freemen, called a grand jury. If you're going to be tried for a crime that Congress has said is a crime, you got to be indicted. A grand jury has to indict you. If you want to know more about the grand jury, go to commonlawyer.com. Go to Winter's Inn, that's the law school, and take the course that Sheriff Darleaf and I taught on the grand jury. What is it? Where did it come from? It's part of our common law tradition. It doesn't exist in the rest of the world. Thank God that those went before us had the foresight to put it down on paper and demand it in federal cases in the federal courts. Oh, juries are idiots sometimes and don't care to do their job, but I'm just glad it's part of due process. The process that is due and owing in criminal cases, according to our common law, is there must be a grand jury indictment. And a grand jury consists of at least 12 members. Can be 15, 23, 48, and many more after that, but at least 12. Traditionally, our federal grand juries have been 23. But at common law, this is the point that we discovered and taught in our class, among many other things. No matter how many men are in a grand jury, an indictment requires agreement of 12 to indict. If there are 12 members of a grand jury, all 12 have to agree or there is no indictment. If there are 15 members in a grand jury, at least 12 has to agree or there is no indictment. If there are 23 members impaneled in a grand jury, indictment happens if 12 agree. The number 12 is key. See, it's not about majority. If there are 25 members of a grand jury, this is the common law doctrine, 12 must agree to indict before there's an indictment. As our common law says, a true bill. A true bill. Now, our grand juries do not follow that rule now. It's kind of odd. It's not written down what it's to be. It's not written down how many members, or never was in the beginning of our Constitution, how many members there have to be of a grand jury. Why? Because we're common law people. We knew. We didn't have to write that down. Our Constitution doesn't explain anything, doesn't say how many members have to be in a grand jury. Why? Because it was part of who we are. No, nothing in our Constitution says that a trial jury has 12 members, but we do. Our common law tradition is the way things are, and they ain't going to change. We observe it, and it's who we are, and we just know. Matter of fact, our Constitution explains nothing. It just throws it out there because everybody knew. And we still do. You all would tell me how many members on a trial jury, 12. The grand jury will hear your accuser and all the proof he has to bring against you. And if they think that he is wrong in supposing you guilty, that his proof is not sufficient, they will refuse to have you tried and you are set free at liberty. I've been indicted by a grand jury. It took 3 grand juries to get the job done. Unfortunately, I don't think that should be allowed. I think that our common law tradition would say no to that. They impaneled one grand jury against me and they said, no way. They impaneled another grand jury against me and they said, no way again. After a lot of stepping and fetching and weeping and gnashing the teeth of the prosecutor. This is over a period of a few years. And they impaneled another one against me. I heard about it. Of course, it's secret. They packed it and got what they wanted. They got to cheat. The evil empire has to cheat to get what they want. That's why they cheated in the election. A majority of Americans are not going to vote for the stupidity that the left wants. Now we go back to the Bible. They had 2 political parties in the gospel records. Jesus Christ went head to head, locked horns, as it were, with both of them at the same time. And then they had him murdered. One of them was fundamentally the conservative political party called the Pharisees, popularly called the Pharisees. The other one, the rival party, that was the right. The rival party were called the Sadducees. They were the intellectuals. They were the left. The Pharisees were the right. The Sadducees were the left. They were the intellectuals. They never could get a majority. We read ancient history about them. It never happened. The Pharisees could get a majority because they were fundamentally conservative. But their religion was empty. It was all a matter of form, ceremonies. Do this, don't do that. That's not what Christianity is, friends. At its base, it has rules, and you want to live a decent life. Yeah, that's for Christian people. But at the foundation, it's not about morality. You don't get into the kingdom of heaven, the family of God, by being a good little boy or girl. No, you get in just like you got into the family, you got in the flesh. You're born into it. That's why Jesus Christ said it behooves you to be born from above. And in both cases, it's not what you do, it's what God does. Keep that in mind. So you don't get in by following a set of rules, and you can't get thrown out by not following them. No, that's a different matter. It goes both ways. Goes both ways. If proof of crime is not sufficient, they refuse to have you tried. See, the job of the grand jury is just real simple. The grand jury just says either yes to the government or no. That's all. That's all. Simple, no complications. And if it's not simple, it ain't going to work. The grand jury says, yes, Mr. Government, you may try this man for a crime and put his life, liberty, property, or a combination thereof at risk before a 12-man jury. Or no, you may not. The job of the grand jury is just to say yes or no to the government. Yes, you may try him. No, you may not. What's the job of the trial jury of 12? Same thing in this way. Just say yes or no. Yes, Mr. Prosecutor, you may use the force of the government to take this man's life, liberty, property, or a combination thereof. Or no, you may not. You see how simple it is? There is no halfway. It's got to be yes or no. And if they don't do that, and of course, with the 12-man jury, just like the grand jury, there has to be 12 that agree, but the trial jury is only 12. And they all got to agree to what? Guilty or not guilty. That's it. Yes or no, up or down, in or out, black or white. That's it. Either he's guilty or he isn't. And if they're wavering, they're saying, well, we're kind of in the middle. What does it have to be? Well, that means not guilty. That's our common law demands that. Any wavering. We talked about the mugwump. Remember the mugwump? I learned this when I was a boy. Tell me I'm not educated. I learned the stuff that's important. I learned what a mugwump was. I was over on the hardware place. My granddad used to make hickory canes and hickory whistles. Hickory canes and hickory whistles, quite an art, lost now. He could do it with baling wire and a pocket knife, both of them. Baling wire and a pocket knife. He'd take those hickory saplings off those shagbark hickories and he'd hook them over the stalk rack on his pickup truck, take baling wire and tie them in that position, leave them there, and they dry, and then you had a hickory cane. He'd cut me with his pocket knife, about as big as your finger, about that long, a piece of hickory, and he'd go around it. Well, he'd cut a notch in it on the end, and of course, hickory bark slides off. He'd girdle it with his pocket knife, pull that one end off, make sure it's carved out right, put it back on. You got a hickory whistle. Of course, the thing about hickory whistles is they dry out and don't last forever, but for boys, it's a lot of fun. He showed me how to do a lot of that stuff. Make a whistle out of a blade of grass, put it in your fingers, and very loud. Well, we were over there, and he'd build fences out of hickory. Dad used to say about Granddad, you give a piece of baling wire and a hickory pole to Charles Melvin, that was his name, Charles Melvin. You give it a hickory bar or a hickory pole and a piece of baling wire to Charles Melvin, and he can do anything. That's true. He built a catch pen for a cattle down there out of hickory. I helped him out of hickory poles and baling wire. As far as I know, it's still there. Of course, hickory rots kind of fast if it's not dried out right.